Welcome to the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. My name is Alex Weiser. I'm the Director of Public Programs of YIVO. We're delighted to have you here with us today for the talk, The Cantorial Golden Age in America, with scholar and musician Jeremiah Lockwood. This talk is a part of Carnegie Hall's festival, United in Sound America at 250, and we're presenting it in partnership with the American Society for Jewish Music's Jewish Music Forum. For those that don't know YIVO, we're a very special place for the celebration and contemplation of Jewish history and Jewish culture. We have an archive and a library with over 23 million documents and over 400,000 books, which are used by researchers from around the world. And we bring the world of Jewish history and Jewish culture to life through our programs like this, through our classes, and through our exhibitions. So thank you so much for joining us for that. Professor Jeremiah Lockwood is a scholar and musician working in the fields of Jewish music and performance studies and ethnomusicology. He is the founder of the band The Sway Machinery and is currently a fellow at the Katz Center for Advanced Judaic Studies at UPenn.
That's a little old, but that's okay.
That's a little bit old. Okay, he was recently a fellow. His work engages with issues arising from peering into the archives and imagining the power of lost forms of expression to articulate keenly felt needs in the present. His book, Golden Ages, Hasidic Singers and Cantorial Revival in the Digital Age, was published by University of California Press in 2024. And we're so pleased to have Jeremiah here with us today for this talk. Thank you, Jeremiah.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's wonderful to be presenting to the community at YIVO again, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to start my PowerPoint presentation, and hopefully that will go off without a hitch. Alex, can you just confirm that all of that's working okay?
Looks great.
Okay, fantastic. So, as Alex just told you, the presentation today is called The Cantorial Golden Age in America. Golden Age in scare quotes because golden ages are always in the eye of the beholder and always a retrospective construction. At the time of the Cantorial Golden Age, the early 20th century period that is often referred to as the Golden Age of khazones in America, there was a great deal of contention about whether indeed this era was so golden. So we'll be talking about that in a moment. But first, I want to begin by talking about the word cantor. So, as I often do when I'm speaking to audiences about cantorial music, I want to draw to your mind a healthy bit of skepticism about your investment in your own knowledge about what the word cantor means, because this word has been used to describe many different kinds of people, many different kinds of activity across Jewish history. And in the period that we are going to be looking at today, cantors were quite a different kind of communal figure than is currently the case in many communities in the United States. So, healthy skepticism about one's own knowledge and curiosity about the past are kind of guiding features of our inquiry into cantorial music in the early 20th century. And for me personally, I'm very deeply invested in the history of khazones, of cantorial music, in part through my familial connection. This image here on the screen is of my grandfather and one of his records, his record that came out in 1949. And also in the vision of an artist-driven experience of the sacred that cantorial music represented in the hands of its star performers in the period that we're going to be talking about. So the chazan, the cantor, is a form of Jewish personhood, a certain kind of way of being in the world, a certain form of artist that perhaps no longer exists. Right? We're thinking about artists who were using the Eastern European Jewish sacred music tradition as the basis for new forms of creativity that were increasingly tailored to electronic media, right? So the cantor is no longer in this period just a singer in synagogue. They are also a recording artist at times, a performer on radio, a concert artist, a composer, and oftentimes also an ideologue, giving voice to the pressing political and social concerns of the Jewish people in this period. So This gentleman on the screen right here, Leib Glantz, is was in addition to being a cantor, was also an activist in the Poale Zion socialist Zionist movement in Eastern Europe, where he would, in his youth, travel from town to town, holding these kind of spiritual slash political revivals in which his cantorial prayer leading was part of an overall ethos of utopianist longing and social transformation through political activism. This on the screen to the right is an essay that he wrote a little bit later in his career, Khazones der Shir Hashirim von die Shemasen, cantorial music, the song of songs of the Jewish masses, in which he articulates his vision of cantorial music as the voice of the people, of the Jewish proletariat. When his particular synthesis of Jewish sacred music and a socialist utopianist vision of the future were intimately bound up together with each other. So let's just take a quick listen to. We're going to be listening to a bunch of music over the course of this lecture, and I'm going to play you a short excerpt from one of the pieces from Glantz's first recording session in 1928. This is his rendition of Ki Hine Kachomer, a prayer from the Yom Kippur service. All right, so there we get to hear Glantz's vision of cantorial sound as the basis for this very new, very modernist approach to music, drawing on his experiences working with elder cantors in Eastern Europe, but also on the soundscapes of new classical musics coming out of the nationalist schools of Eastern Europe. In this period, Ki Hine Kachomer, it's a prayer text from the Kol Nidre service, in which God is compared to a craftsman, an artist, and it's kind of very symbolically relevant to the sacred work of the cantor as this both craftsperson, visionary artist, and Klei Kodesh, sacred functionary. In 1924 in New York City, there were 123 registered members of the Chazonim Farband, or the in English referred to as the Jewish Ministers Cantors Association of America and Canada. So the New York branch had 123 members, and this is rather astounding. In comparison, today in New York City, in Orthodox synagogues, there are approximately 5 cantors who are employed as year-round cantors in New York City. If you expand that to include the Reform and Conservative movements, maybe a couple of dozen. So we've seen an incredible contraction of the cantorial field. But in this period, Cantorial music was a thriving part of the soundscape of New York City. And among this cohort were many who we can reasonably refer to as stars, and people who had recording contracts, who were performing in theaters, and increasingly in vaudeville as well. Vaudeville was also a site for cantorial performance, and later radio and film. The first sound film was The Jazz Singer, as is well known, and this film featured Yassila Rosenblatt, who was probably the best known the figure from this period of cantorial commercial success, who has retained perhaps the biggest footprint in the contemporary Jewish music world and is best known today. Just gonna take a second. I want to play you a record. This is one of the kind of key classics of the cantorial sound. It was a monster hit when it was released in 1928. The critic Mordechai Yerdeni spoke about Rosa de Shabbos as it roiled the Jewish street. People were singing its chorus everywhere, right? And this special sound of the record of that Pierre Pinchik's kind of masterpiece and best known composition. It encompasses this kind of very intimate sounds of Jewish prayer, drawing on the sounds of the Hasidic prayer house, and yet also has this kind of hyper dramatic, almost operatic approach to composition with extremes of dynamics. Let's take a listen. So that brief excerpt is from kind of the middle of the piece. It's extremely well-known chorus section in which the words Rosa de Chavez are repeated. And interestingly, this piece of liturgy is not part of the prayer service that cantors would typically be performing. Right? This is taken from the specifically Hasidic prayer book, referred to as the Nusach Ari, or the mystically oriented additions to the Ashkenazi prayer book that were adopted by Hasidic leaders in the 18th century. So this record makes reference to a style of prayer that, in the American context, and especially in the cantorial context, where the Nusach Ashkenaz was typically used, this record is kind of like a hearkening back to a concept of Eastern European small town life and of Hasidic Judaism, which at that point in the 1920s played a small role in American Judaism. Okay, let's. So here we can see some of the key figures. On the left hand of your screen are publicity headshots of Joseph Schlisky, Pierre Pinchik, and Mordechai Hershman, who were three of the major stars of the 1920s scene in New York City. And, as you can see, they were extremely beautiful men. their beauty, their kind of matinee idol kinds of presentation were a part of the allure, part of the charisma of their performance. Right? They were not simply performers on record or at the pulpit. They were also an embodiment of physical grace and beauty and achievement, both in the sacred space of Jewish traditional arts of synagogue sound, but also in this parallel world of arts and entertainment in which Jews were increasingly playing a profound and impactful role. On the right side of the screen, we see an advertisement. I don't know the exact date of it. It's a clipping from the scrapbook of Beryl Hagi, who was one of the great figures of this period as well, and who recorded many incredible records of cantorial recitatives. And this is a advertisement. And Hagi's archival holdings are in Yivo, where I found this image, and so countless thanks to the incredible resources of Yivo, and I've drawn so much benefit from over the course of my years of research on this subject. So this is an advertisement for a Carnegie Hall concert, which is going to be kind of like a who's who of the scene, right? So we have on Beryl Hagi, Baruch Shor, Zabel Kvarten, David Reitman, these towering figures of Jewish mass media, right? They're all artists who had record contracts with the major labels of the day. The recording music industry in this period was very interested in Jewish music, right? So the major labels of the period, Victor, Pathé, they had strong ethnic music departments, not just of Jewish music, of a variety of groups that were part of the immigrant culture of New York and America in the period. We're sort of in this period when mass immigration from various parts of the world, especially Eastern Europe, are having a profound impact on the culture and the cultural geography of New York City. And the record music industry is extremely receptive to this. They view Jews as a market that they want to engage with, right? And they do so in large part through cantors, right? The major genres of Jewish recorded music in this period are cantorial music and Yiddish theater, right? And at times there's overlap between these two different fields. Okay, so let's get back to our friend Yessela Rosenblatt. Unusual in this period in that he was someone who presented as a Hasidic Jew, right? As we saw in our images of Pinchik and of Schlitzky. These guys looked more like stars of the stage, right? They were typically clean shaven. Um, they were attired in Western male conventional forms of comportment, not presenting themselves in Hasidic garb. Yessela Rosenblatt, part of his image was as a traditionalist, right? This was not necessarily true of his music, though, right? So his music crossed, both he encompassed highly traditionalist synagogue chant styles that would have sounded quite I'm talking about on his records. Some of his records sound quite like what one would expect from a cantor's performance at the Amud, in synagogue ritual contexts. Other pieces were in a kind of a quasi-classical music style that reflected his years as a cantor in Germany, where a more westernized cantorial music was the norm. And some of his records sounded kind of jazzy, right? Were influenced by the American scene. I'm going to play a little excerpt from one of his well-known records. This is Hamavdil, and let's let's get this a record of Rosenblatt from 1924. Hold on one second, and here we are. Okay, so this piece of Rosenblatt's was recorded. This came out on the Victor recording label, and was recorded as part of a busy day at the Edison recording studio in New Jersey. It was according to its matrix number in the ledgers of the Victor Company. It was recorded in between a session by Italian baritone and comedian Giuseppe De Laurentiis, making a record of a novelty song called Subway, and then immediately after was followed by Orquesta Internacional's kind of Latin inflected dance record in Inquieto. So this is cantors were part of a cultural scene that was polyglot, that reflected the hectic heterogeneity of immigrant life in New York City. And we're also in dialogue with this. It's very likely that the instrumentalists in the backing orchestra were also playing on the records for the other bands that were recording that day. So, and this is all part of Rosenblatt's extremely successful career that overlapped across pollinated between synagogue, theater stages, and recording studios, and in his later period in vaudeville, right, where he was spent many years touring as part of vaudeville performances, where he was squeezed between different forms of novelty acts and circus-like performers, right? And the music reflects this kind of circus-like atmosphere in some ways, right? So there are a variety of registers of cantorial performance in this period, ranging from aspirations towards the sublimity of the great artists in the classical romantic tradition, images of Hasidic life being taken hold of as the basis for music, which is both kind of a kind of memory work and a transformation of heritage into new forms of art, and then also as a kind of a pop culture, a Jewish pop culture, not dissimilar from the Yiddish theater. So cantors are enjoying huge success in all of these different registers, and typically the cantors would be able to code switch between these different kinds of stylistic areas. So everything's going very well, right? Cantors are doing extremely well in the United States. But is this indeed a golden age? Well, according to the critics, perhaps not. So we have Bass Shelvin, who is the music critic for Der Tag, one of the daily newspapers in New York City, in an essay that he wrote for a cantorial publication, the yearbook of the Chazonim Verband that was published in 1924. He writes, whether you like it or not, you get the impression from this chazonis boom, and he used the English word boom, transliterated into the Hebrew alphabet, that chazonis is currently in a golden period. Is chazonis really in such a shining position now? The answer is definitively negative, right? And the reason that he gives for this is that cantors are no longer upholding their role as signifiers of ethnic uplift, of education and cultural transformation into ethical citizens of righteous, halachically bounded Jews, the visions for what cantorial music was supposed to achieve in a very conservative conceptualization of the role of synagogue music. So the term, perhaps some of you are familiar with the term shund. Shund is a word that's used a lot was used a lot by critics in Yiddish literature and theater to describe low genre art, kind of fast and cheap productions that were highly sentimental, that featured a lot of sex and violence, kind of penny paperbacks and cheaply produced theater pieces. So in the cantorial context, the term that's more often used is hefker, right? And there's the cantorial low genre cantorial music was described as being hefker khazones. So we'll talk a little bit more about what this hefker consists of, what hefker means. But first, I just want to draw attention to Elias Saludkowski, Polish-born cantor who moved to immigrated to the United States in 1925 and continued his role as a performer of cantorial music and of European classical music, and as a critic and author about cantorial music. So he writes he describes hefker khazones as being a kind of a pervasive problem troubling the world of Jewish sacred music. He describes a cantorial culture in which one finds no trace of religious impression and also no artistic form, a cantorial culture that sates itself with cold, ignorant theatrical effects, and in which eccentric gestures and clowning during davening play a major role. Okay, so what's going on here? What are the stakes of this critical critique? Why are cantors being denigrated by their peers for their popularity? So let's take a step back into the 19th century in Europe. In Vienna in the 1820s, the Jewish community was very young, right? Jewish residence in the capital of the Habsburg Empire had just been made legal, and this was a very elite and economically and politically elite Jewish community, and they wanted a sacred rite that would parallel their social transformations that the community was trying to undertake, right? That they wanted a Jewish, an expression of their Jewishness, but one that would be an effective representation of their new status as prospective citizens of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and of German culture. So they hired a progressive young Jewish singer and someone from a cantorial family, but someone who also had European classical musical training. And this was Solomon Sulzer, who became the first Oberkantor of Vienna. And Sulzer went about through his own compositions and by commissioning European non-Jewish Viennese composers to write new music for the synagogue. So let's have a quick listen to a recording of a piece by Sulzer. This is his Miadir, as performed on phonograph by Zabel Kvarten, who was one of the great stars of the scene in this period, and this is his recording of Sulzer's Miadir from I believe it's from 1908. It's from quite early in the recorded music, recorded cantorial music period. Oops, excuse me one second. Here we have it. we can hear in Sulzer's music this kind of translation of Jewish sacred sound into a German Romantic vein, right? And this concept of artistic and cultural achievement that is going to be this is seen as being the new purview of the cantorate, right? That a professionalized cantorate that will express the aspirations of Jews for political transformation is the new ideal that is expressed through Seltzer. This concept of Bildung or education and cultivation of the community is the kind of the going to be the new calling card of cantors in the Seltzer model. And Seltzer's achievements and his musical concepts were brought into the Eastern European sphere by students who came from Poland and Russia to study with Seltzer, including Pinchas Minkowski, who was the chief cantor at the Broder Synagogue in Odessa for many years. And Minkowski, to the extent that he's remembered today, is largely through the phonograph controversy that he started in 1911. He published a book-length anti-phonograph diatribe in which he castigated cantors for betraying this kind of Bildung orientation of the cantorate by embracing pop culture. And he saw this as being a direct threat to the holiness of Jewish sacred experience and to the hard-earned new status of the cantor as representatives of this kind of new blossoming of Jewish high culture. And he was to some extent successful in convincing some cantors to shun recording, right? So, for instance, his Minkowski's kind of disciple Zaludkowski, who we mentioned before, made no records. He's one of the major stars of the period who there's no representation of his work, in part because he adopted this Minkowski ideology about recording. So, hefker khazones. Well, first, I want to just spend a moment defining the Yiddish Hebrew term hefker. It is a term that derives from halachic Jewish legal discussions, but is also has a certain kind of mood in the Yiddish language, which is also important for understanding why cantors described cantorial music that they did not approve of as being hefker or hefkeres is the adjectival form. So in halachic discourse, hefker describes ownerless property, something that has been abandoned. And how can something become hefker? Either by renouncing ownership, if something is lost, a property could be taken away as a punishment for certain kinds of infractions and become hefker or become ownerless. But hefker is also used to describe things that are created by God that no one can claim ownership over, like the mountains or the sea or the ocean. So in the Yiddish language, this term is used somewhat like the way we use the word abandon in English, right? Oftentimes to signify sexual abandonment or some kind of erotic straining of limits. The term is also used in reference to this fourth category of God's creation to refer to revelation, right? Something that is hefker is something which defies the limits of the normative and perhaps towards transcendent aims or means. All right, so let's talk about hefker chazonis. So why would chazonis be hefker? One of the key pieces of evidence that these kind of cantorial conservatives bring is that cantors are expressing themselves. Sorry. With a degree of with a lack of attunement to the ethical purpose of their music, right? And So this is seen in the self-promotion that goes hand in hand with cantorial popular culture in this period, and also it is seen in the increasing presence of women as performers in cantorial music. Right, this is something that was in these kinds of anti-hefker discourse, the presence of women cantors is frequently mentioned, right? So starting in the 1920s, there began to be heard in New York women performers of cantorial music. The first being Sophie Kurtzer, who was a star performer on stage and on record. She did not lead services in synagogues. But she kind of laid the foundation for this new model of women performers of cantorial music who were referred to as khazones. So a chazanza in Yiddish is an honorific for a cantor's wife, but here the term is repurposed to describe women who are themselves cantors. So a little later on, it's starting in the 30s and 40s, we see in this kind of later period of the kind of the sort of gradual decline of the cantorial golden age, women performers of chazanas who are suddenly claiming authority not just as performers on stage and on record, but also leading services in unregulated spaces. So for instance, on the left, we have an image here of Shendela the Chazanta. She was, a regular leader of holiday services for, this is for a Rosh Hashanah service. This image here, a poster for her performance as the Shliach Tzibur of in the Astor Hotel, and there's this kind of parallel sacred music circuit in the Borscht Belt in the Catskills and in hotels in Florida and and on the Jersey Shore, where Jewish New Yorkers would go to spend the holidays, and typically part of the accoutrements of this experience would be a star cantor leading services. And in these rabbinically unregulated spaces outside of synagogues, women could be the prayer leaders, right? So one of the biggest stars of the kind of later period of the Cantorial Golden Age are the Malevsky family, led by Samuel Malevsky, who was a protege of Yossele Rosenblatt. And Samuel started a family band with his daughter Goldie Malevsky as the principal soloist. And again, the Malevskys were working this unregulated hotel and theater circuit to lead prayer services with women's voices prominently featured. Let's listen to a little bit of Goldie Malevsky. Okay, so we're gonna pause there. But I'll try to create a playlist or something that we can share with participants so that people can get deeper into these records at a later date. Um, so let's see. This image of abandonment, however, could goes in different directions, right? So who is doing the abandoning in this rubric of hefker and chazonis? So a cantors, while they were criticized as being losing kind of this ethical imperative of Bildung, which was part of the late 19th century conception of cantorial culture. Cantors saw their work rather differently, right? They believed that the work that they were doing was specifically creating a memorial culture or memory culture around the sounds of Eastern European Jewish life, right? And in the memoirs of cantors like Zavel Kvartin, Samuel Vagoda, they speak very specifically about the fact that they see their work as being a riposte to the Sulzer aesthetic, right? That they are consciously choosing the sounds of small town Eastern European Jewish life as the basis for their art forms. And in this period, the 1920s, the memorialization of and memory and emotional involvement with European Jewish life became a kind of a crucial organizational element of the Jewish community in New York City. How were people to deal with the mass casualties that were taking place in pogroms that were part of the Russian Revolution, right? So this is in this period, pogroms, which had been a feature of Jewish life, famously starting in the 1880s in Russia, saw a tremendous uptick in terms of their frequency and their violence, right? And this kind of sense of the Jewish world being in crisis was a prevalent part of Jewish literature and also of the culture of cantorial music. So I want to play a little bit of, 1928 is kind of in some ways, perhaps the peak year of cantorial recordings, right? The year before the market crash messed up the record music industry. So this is Tikeh Rabbi Ishmael, one of Zavel Kvartin's most famous pieces, in which the cantor's voice gives utterance to this cry of pain and desperation around the fragility and the challenges facing Jewish life in Europe in this period. Tia Rabbi Ishmael is a piece of the liturgy from Ela Eskara, the memorial service, the martyrology service that's said on Yom Kippur, but in this recording, I read it as being a kind of a giving vent, giving utterance to this sense of desperation around the experiences of Jewish life in the period. All right, let's listen to this is kind of the very dramatic ending of the record. Now, this issue of abandonment is also at the core of Jewish liturgy and at the core of the history of the cantorial profession. Now, in this lecture, we've been mostly considering the work of a handful of artists who were huge stars, who were very well known in the Jewish world, in the Yiddish-speaking world, but even these artists who commanded strong salaries from synagogues and from revenue from theater ticket sales, at the same time they were subject to the same kinds of parasitic relationships with record companies as other artists, and just generally speaking, did not have kind of labor protections. So that even an artist like Kvartin, who is a huge star, died basically in poverty, right? And this is a very not at all unusual career trajectory for cantors. So this sense of fragility of the Jewish people is also kind of echoed in the sense of fragility for the cantor themselves, whose ability to perform is centered on their bodies and their ability to achieve greatness on behalf of the congregation. And if they lose that ability, then what will become of them? Right. So this image of the elder cantor is one that appears in Yiddish theater and a variety of Yiddish songs that were written in this era, but it's also kind of inscribed into the degrees of pathos in which certain aspects of the liturgy are traditionally said by cantors. So, for instance, the Al Tashlichenu from the Shema Kolenu prayer that's said on the high holidays. In some ways, this is kind of like the anthem of cantors, right? In which cantors very often give a special vent to their well of emotion, their sense of personal fragility, and in this way expressing the sense of fragility of their community writ large. So I'm gonna play a very special recording. This is a bootleg recording, something that someone snuck a tape recorder, in a suit pocket or a tallis bag into a prayer service, and this is a recording of my grandfather, Jacob Konigsberg, recorded in the 1960s. So this sense of the fragility of cantorial careers inspired the creation of new kinds of protections for cantors. The Cantors Assembly, for instance, which was founded in the late 40s, early 50s, as a kind of a union for cantors, and in the same period, the sense of the fragility of cantorial pedagogy, or traditional forms of pedagogy, which were traditionally achieved through some kind of an apprenticeship relationship between child choir singers and elder cantors in Europe. This was how most of the star cantors of the Golden Age learned. They were immigrants from Eastern Europe, and they were translating and transporting their education in this kind of folkloric, quasi-folkloric idiom into a new electronically mediated form. But in the United States, they're starting in 1924 with the reform in immigration laws. Much fewer cantors were able to come from Europe, and then, of course, after the devastations of the Shoah, the wellspring of Europe as a source for Jewish culture was no more, right? So this sense of crisis in cantorial culture really reached a peak in these years in the late 40s. And you see in this period the establishment of cantorial training programs and of cantorial unions. And also kind of a shift in the way people are thinking about cantorial music. And I'm not talking about fans of the music, but the way institutional leaders in the United States are talking about it. So Israel Goldfarb, famed as the writer of the Shalom Aleichem song that is pervasive in Jewish American life, he gave an address at the Jewish Theological Seminary in 1954, in which he said, "The setup of the modern synagogue with the sermon by the rabbi, the introduction of prayers in English, the responsive readings, and the congregational singing leaves no room for a star cantor as the sole attraction." And then he goes on to say, "In the future, the Kvartens, the Reutmans, and the Rosenblatts will be listened to as a novelty by lovers and connoisseurs of the old Chazanic style." So he's imagining a future in which cantorial music is no more. And, to some extent, this was the desire of the leaders of institutions. They wanted to create a new kind of American synagogue that would be responsive to the new norms of Jewish American life, which were to be as American as possible, right? To forge a form of Judaism which would coalesce with the kind of cultural requirements of assimilation. Uh, Nevertheless, as they say, the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated, right? So cantorial music did not die, but certainly went into an underground period. But in the recent period, there's been a kind of efflorescence of interest in these 100-year-old records, which are used as pedagogical objects for young singers. Um, Primarily in the Hasidic community, where there's really a strong kind of subculture of young artists who are interested in cantorial music and have uh, know how to sing these old records, and are there's kind of a marginal but not completely negligible community and some degree of support in terms of concerts that happen in the Hasidic community, and certainly in Europe, where state-sponsored concerts of Jewish music are kind of a normal part of the functioning of cultural life. Young Hasidic artists are brought over to Europe to perform these historic forms of cantorial music, and then there are also artists from other communities who are embracing cantorial music as their this embracing the golden age cantorial style as the basis for their work. I have pictured here my esteemed colleagues and friends, Judith Berkson on the left, who's a classical composer, as well as a cantor, who's very deep in establishing new forms of pedagogy to teach people to be able to sing in the Golden Age cantorial style. Ricky Rose is a star performer of Yiddish song, but also very, very deep interpreter of old time khazones. And Shahana McKinney-Baldwin, who's doing a project about one of the Chazantas, Madame Goldie Steiner, who's the only known African-American woman performer of chazonis from this Golden Age cantorial period. Each of these artists pictured, and then in a scene from a recording session in the center is Shimmy Miller, who's the son of a famed cantorial family, and is kind of an important figure in the Hasidic music world in a variety of ways, but is also one of the leading voices in cantorial music today. And to his left is Yoel Cohen, another brilliant performer. So there's a whole world out there in which this music is continuing to inspire forms of creativity. I'm going to leave it there, so we have some time for the Q&A. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. My name's Jeremiah Lockwood. I'm including my email if people want to get in touch with me, and also a little shout out to my new undertaking with Judith Berkson, Chazanis Underground, a record label dedicated to the preservation and promotion of voices of cantorial revival. All right, thank you all so much.
Oh, this was wonderful, Jeremiah. Thank you so much. And just echo what someone said in the chat, that sharing a playlist of some of the music you've discussed today would be tremendous. So we have a bunch of questions. I want to just actually start by zooming out the frame really wide for a second. Could you just say, Afein Fus, how did Chazonis emerge? And what is the very early era of Chazonis look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great question, and like a lot of questions about Jewish music, we don't know that much about what cantorial music sounded like before the early 19th century. And the first cantorial music that's really well represented in terms of being notated is music which is presumably quite revolutionary and different from what went before. So, the first publications of cantorial music are really Seltzer's work. He's the kind of the groundbreaker, although he was immediately followed by many other cantors also writing in this kind of Germanic romantic synagogue style. But by the later part of the 19th century, there were many cantors who were beginning to create anthologies most famously Bears, the Der Baltofila, which is a very important work for giving us information about traditional nusach, or in other words, the traditional styles of cantorial melodies for different parts of the prayer services. The cantors at the turn of the 20th century, who were kind of the forerunners or the early recording star cantors, they viewed their work as a return to pre-Sulzerian cantorial aesthetics. So what are we supposed to do with that claim? I mean, it's difficult to substantiate. So one text that's frequently looked upon as being a source for the Golden Age cantorial style is the work of Kashtan, who's a great late 18th, early 19th century cantor whose son was a protege of Sulzer and wrote a book in which he notated his father's Weintraub, Shlomo Weintraub's work, right? So, and cantors such as Kvarten, who wrote a beautiful memoir, where we get a lot of information about this period from. He said that he got that book and was studying it every night and was using it to try to develop his cantorial style. So presumably there was continuity, right? And the cantorial sound that we hear on these records obviously didn't come out of nowhere. These are all people who grew up in rich cantorial backgrounds, sometimes from cantorial families or having apprenticed with elder cantors in Europe. But it's difficult to speak in a kind of scientifically objectifiable way about this, right? Because so much of it is mythologized, right? The way cantors write about their work is as if it is something which is deeply rooted in the past and is a kind of a transmission from ancient Jewish sounds. And as we all know, this is how everybody talks about their work, right? Innovation is almost in the Jewish world, innovation is typically couched in terms that make it sound like it is traditionalism. So it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah. So a lot of the change you talked about today had to do with recordings and this, kind of media environment and how that impacted khazones. That is happening in tandem with the kind of shift of the Jewish community to America, and this is this is a question. Is that happening in tandem with the shift to America? Is the story of khazones in America really the story of this media environment, or are there other things that are distinctive about khazones in America?
So because this is a lecture about khazones in America, I made the focus on New York and on the New York scene. However, Yiddish culture, of course, is transnational, right? And this is very much also true of khazones culture, right? Which was a part of the general Yiddish culture of the period. So cantors immigrated from countries in Europe to the United States. They also went back, right? Pinchas Minkowski, who we talked about, he left his position at the Broder Synagogue to become the cantor at the Adas Yeshurun, which is today the Eldridge Street Museum, and he came to New York and was performing in his kind of this sort of rarefied classical music influenced style. And basically, the New York scene had shifted to this rootsier, more Yiddish kind of sound, and people didn't really appreciate what he was doing. And he went back to Europe. Right. Mm. So, I mean, this is the stories like that are kind of representative of the transnational nature of what's happening in this period.
One viewer had asked if most of the cantors you discussed today, I mean, you mentioned it with some, but if you could kind of summarize for us, if it's possible, were most of the cantors European born and then immigrated to America, or were many American born and you just gave an example of going back to Europe? It's like, do you have a sense of what the numbers are there to help situate that?
Sure. So I gave that statistic of in 1924 there are 123 members of the Chazonim Verband in New York. Every single one, there's one exception. Okay, every single one except one was born in Europe and was an immigrant. Okay. Yeah. So if you are a professional cantor in New York in the 20s, it basically means that you were born in Europe. So a little bit later it changes, right? So starting in the late 30s and certainly by the 40s, you have a lot of someone. I see someone saying, "Who was the exception?" Um, oh my goodness. Okay, I'm sorry. It's. I had it just a second ago when I thought of it. I'll get back to that.
Okay.
But by the 30s and 40s, we have, as I gave in the examples of the kind of the later khazones, Shandela, also known as birth name Jean Garnish. She was born in Philadelphia. Um, Goldie Malevsky and all of the Malevsky choir singers, all of Samuel's children, were born in the United States. um, Label Waldman, who's also looked upon as being kind of a stalwart of the Eastern European cantorial sound. He was born in New York, right? So, and then, it's this kind of, once you get, yeah, into this period, it's increasingly a scene of uh, New York-born singers who were not only New York, but singers born in these kinds of Eastern European immigrant neighborhoods whose first language is Yiddish, who are deeply involved in Jewish musical life, and who are traditionalists in the sense of that they're learning from elder cantors. But increasingly, records of cantorial music also become exceedingly important as a pedagogical source, right? So by the late 1930s, young American-born cantors are increasingly learning directly from these star cantorial records of the 20s, and that became even more the case in the subsequent generations. Where by the time you get into the late 50s and 60s, there are reissue albums of the classic cantorial records, which had been issued as 78 RPM singles, one song per side of a record. So the reissue albums in the 50s and 60s established the sense of there being a canon, and people knew who the stars were through these reissue albums, and that kind of decisively shaped the post-war cantorial sense of what the tradition consisted of.
Hmm. Thank you so much for that. We have a bunch of questions left, and we're kind of in overtime already, so maybe we could do a lightning round. Here's a question: the organ. Why do we hear so much organ in these recordings? Because presumably Orthodox synagogues didn't use organs in actual services, and then Reform synagogues weren't necessarily following this kind of musical tradition. So, can you explain that?
Yeah. So while it's true that it would have been very unusual for there to be an organ in an Orthodox synagogue in this period, there was a lot of kind of gray area in Jewish practice in this period. The expectations of what would be happening in the synagogue had a degree of flexibility. For instance, in Neolog, which is kind of the Hungarian version of Reform, there were certainly cantors in synagogues who were performing in a style that was sort of syncretic of the Salzerian style and the kind of the neo-shtetl kind of Yiddishlich style. And in some of those synagogues, they had organs, right? So, and certainly in the major Reform synagogues, like the major synagogues in Budapest, for instance, they had an organ, right? And Zabel Kvartin was the cantor there. Not, I mean, he eventually left, and he writes about his conflicts with the synagogue about what kind of cantorial singing he would do in the services. But the idea of the organ as being an appropriate instrument for cantorial performance was sort of part of the culture, even if it was not actually what was heard in most sites of synagogue-based performance.
Fascinating. The hat that we see on a lot of these cantors, very distinctive.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know where that comes from?
Yes, from the Viennese, the Vienna rite of Seltzer, right, which is this kind of Catholic Austrian milieu. This was a hat that was worn by Christian clerics, and Seltzer just appropriated it for the synagogue. But then it has become a bit maybe like how the shtreimel, which was worn by Polish noblemen in the 18th century, and becomes metonym of Hasidic identity. So the mitre or the special pointed cap. I mean, you do see like the Pope wears one, right? But in Jewish culture, it's become very much representative of the cantorial identity.
One viewer asks if you can compare and contrast cantors who went into theater and opera and those that drew a line and didn't.
Mm. Well, I would say it was very, sort of, even those who drew a line and didn't sort of did. I mean, m many cantors, even if they did not, the famous story is about Yesler Rosenblatt rejecting $1,000 a night offer from the Chicago Opera Company. He wanted to do it. He was told by his synagogue that he would be fired if he did it, and so he stepped back. And then that became part of his mythology that it was for religious reasons. But the idea that cantors would not sing in opera is somewhat of a mythological superimposition. And many cantors did sing opera, and many cantors also brought elements of opera into their cantorial performance. Famously having a contrafacta, of
Yeah.
a melody from opera brought in to perform musically marked parts of the service.
So there's another question here about the finances of it, and you touched on this a little bit, but maybe you can draw it out for us a little bit more.
Mhm.
To what extent could these cantors, like in the union, could they really make a full living from their cantorial jobs, or did they really need these extra theater gigs and such so on and so forth to make a living? Yeah, can you just tease that out for us?
Oh, that's a great question. So I just also want to draw a distinction, which perhaps I was not clear enough about. The Farband, the old time Cantors Association, it was not really a strong union in the
Mm-hmm.
sense of like the Cantors Assembly starting in the 1950s had a monopoly on cantorial hiring in the conservative movement affiliated
So it's more
synagogues
of
in the
a
United States.
fraternal organization or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, kind of a fraternal organization. There was definitely an attempt. They had the aspiration to be a real union. In the late 30s, Benzion Kopf-Kavgen, who was one of the recording star cantors, he made a push for the Cantors Union to become affiliated with the IWO, and they couldn't make a go of it. Basically, the membership couldn't get on the same page. I think some of the older stars feared that it would reduce their potential for income, and then. So there was, or people had different reasons for being against it, but he was not able to translate labor unionism, which was a commonly held value among Jewish people, into an effective union for cantors in this period.
Um, just a point of clarification from one viewer about the chazantas that you mentioned performing in the Borscht Belt, for example. Were they actually leading prayer services, or were these more concerts or informal gatherings?
Oh, certainly both, But okay, so I could give two examples. So Shendela, the Chazanza, she was a cat, she led services, right? And I mean, in that image from the concert, I'm sorry, the Rosh Hashanah hotel service promotional poster, her choir is all female, also, which is kind of quite amazing. Detail. And she was the cantor in services. So with the Malevsky family, it's a little more, I guess there's some more ambiguity where the cantor was the dad, was Samuel Malevsky, but the lead soloist was in the choir was Goldie, and she would sing substantial parts of the service, including cantorial recitatives as part of the service. So take from that what you will.
Okay, just one final question. How do Richard Tucker and Jan Pierce fit in this story?
They were, brothers-in-law, part of this kind of second wave of American-born in cantorial families. Um, both certainly had skills as cantors, and at times did lead services. Um, I think that they speak to the role of cantors as a kind of voice culture middlemen, right? So people valued the incredible vocal virtuosity of cantors and understood Jews as being a people of great singers, right? That's kind of like a stereotype of Jews in this period, is that they're excellent vocal artists, and that translated into non-Jewish music lovers being aware of cantorial music, and certainly a star like Yasser Rosenblatt was known beyond the Jewish community, and also of Jewish, cantorially trained or coming out of cantorial families, artists gravitating towards opera as being another venue for their talents. And there are many examples of that. Neil Shikoff, whose dad was a well-known cantor, comes to mind. My friend Gaina Soller Keevel, her father was a great cantor, leading the cantor in Brooklyn in the 50s and 60s, and his two daughters both became opera singers, after having sung as choristers for their dad. So this kind of this work of immigrant cantors, the children in the United States doing some work in the synagogue, but really seeing their pathways more forward as opera singers is not at all uncommon.
Yeah. Well, Jeremiah, thank you so much. This has been really wonderful. And for those that we didn't get to your question or are curious to explore this further, I do highly recommend Jeremiah's book, which is for sale in the Evo store, and we put the link for that in the chat. And you should definitely follow Jeremiah and all the wonderful things he's doing. There are recording projects, releasing projects, lots to follow for those interested in this. Thank you so much, Jeremiah.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure to get to work with you and with you. It's really a joy.
All right, everyone. We'll see you all soon. Thanks for joining. Take care.